What's up, everybody? Welcome to Horror Reviews, and let's talk about another hyped up 2024 horror film. This time we're talking about Oddity. Now, does this one live up to the hype? So Oddity is a Shudder original horror film, and we've got two of these in theaters this year, which is pretty cool, I have to say, to sit in theaters and see the Shudder logo pop up, In a Violent Nature, and now Oddity. But Shudder original horror films are really hit and miss. They're all over the place. You never know exactly what you're going to get. Of course, the fact that it comes to theaters usually is a indicator that it's pretty hyped up, or there's some reason it's getting a theatrical release and not going straight to Shudder. And this one did have a little bit of hype around it, not nearly to the extent that Longlegs did. The marketing, of course, wasn't anywhere near as ambitious as what Longlegs had. Doesn't have nearly the backing behind it, of course, but it was sitting at 100% Rotten Tomatoes score for a while before it's been released, which I don't know if you guys have noticed this or not, but this is a thing that I really noticed this year. Movies will come out and there'll be a little bit of hype, a little bit of buzz, and they'll sit 100% Rotten Tomatoes for a month or two before they come out. And sometimes they're movies that you don't know anything about. You've never heard anything about them, and it's a little questionable. You're like, what is this horror film? Then it will drop on streaming or something like that, and it'll go to a 35% splat or a 20% splat, or it'll be a 9 on IMDb, and it'll just sit there with Rotten Tomatoes for a while. And then all of a sudden it comes out and it goes to a 2 out of 10. And I've seen that a whole bunch this year on a bunch of different movies. So obviously those must be filmmakers reviewing it, or early reviews from filmmakers that are involved in the movies. But it's just an interesting, curious thing. I'm not exactly sure what that is, because usually the score is just hidden, until it's pretty close to the release date. But I've been seeing that a lot this year. What is that? Expectations are such an interesting thing when going into a movie of any kind, but especially a hyped up horror movie, because it can go so many different directions. Scary is such a different thing to so many different people. So when people say scariest film of the year, most intense film of the year, what does that mean to you going into this film? So I tried to really just keep that in mind, going from Longlegs and the hype around that, coming into this and trying to see what is scary about this film. It could be a million different things. So I tried to just round my expectations. But on top of all of that, of course, I did actually see Chris Stuckman's review on on Letterboxd, talking about the ticking bomb underneath the table and comparing it to what Hitchcock said about films and comparing that to this film. And I do think actually he summarized it very well. I haven't seen his video review on Oddity. I'm actually not even sure if he's done one yet, but I did see his Letterboxd review. And like Chris Stuckman or not, I think he summarized it very well. But again, going into this, I just tried to kind of keep that pushed at the back of my mind, not really think about it. As I said, though, I'm genuinely happy to say that this delivered on so many accounts for me. Like I said, it jumped up to my second favorite film of the year. Now, of course, my favorite film of the year so far is The First Omen. Now, take that for what you want. That's my favorite horror film I've seen this year. It's also my favorite film I've seen this year. Oddity is number 2 at the moment. So, my taste is different than yours. And again, what you appreciate in a horror film and what you find scary is so vastly different from every person. All that being said, let's get into the positives about Oddity, and just keep that in mind, kind of what I had said when I say this film is scary and it genuinely scared me. That is different for every single person. So I will elaborate a little bit in a second, but honestly, this is the most scared I've been in theaters or watching a horror film in quite a while. I cannot remember the last time or last movie that I sat there and was genuinely frightened and on edge. The First Omen has some intense moments, has some scares. I felt it, but sitting through Oddity, I was alone in my row. I went to go see this by myself. My wife didn't go see it with me, but there were people on the other side, just further down, people in front of me, people behind me. But I was there were moments where I was sitting there genuinely in theaters watching this thinking, this is intense. This is a lot. And when is this going to let up? I was thinking, I don't know if I can take much more of this. Obviously not in the literal sense. I'm not literally thinking oh God, I can't watch it. I'm going to look away. But you feel it. Such anticipation. My heart's pounding. My breathing is heavy. I can feel myself gripping the side of the arms or whatever of the chair. And that concept, you're very aware of the fact that you are on edge. So if that makes sense, you're sucked into the movie enough, it's entertaining you enough, but you're able to feel the tension in the room long enough to actually sit and think about it, you know? Sometimes it's tense for a moment and then there's like a jump scare, but when you can feel tension building throughout to a point where you're like aware of it, is like a different level of scary, a different level of suspense. And again, that word scary is so generic. So I'm just kind of throwing it out there in terms of, yeah, this is a scary horror film. But as I mentioned, what aspects scare you? I was in the theater and as I said, the tension was so tight, someone sneezed and one of the women in the back went, oh, oh, and like it scared her, but it wasn't like that like teenage, like, ah. It was like she genuinely was frightened and was trying to gain control, gain composure of herself. So the whole theater was on edge. The whole theater was quiet except for one guy checking his watch. So again, it's like, obviously he wasn't enjoying this. This is a slower paced film. Obviously he didn't find this to be scary. And I've seen a couple of reviews that I read after the fact. Some people love it. Some people think it's really boring. I read someone that's not truly a horror film, not really scary, but I enjoyed it. I don't know what that means to them. To me, this is a perfect example of what a horror film should be. This is scary to me. I think what Oddity does really well, but also is a negative for it, is that it doesn't overthink its premise. Now, again, there are some negative aspects to the story, but it does such a great job of just telling you what you need to know. There's not anything over complex. There's not a whole lot of like crazy situations going on. It's a very simplistic setting. This house, this sort of very interesting architecturally designed house in the middle of nowhere. You've got a small set of characters and you've got very minimal lighting, dark scenes, and that's all you really need. You've got the story unfolding and it's very simple. It doesn't try to do anything crazy over the top. It doesn't try to be super unpredictable or super like out there or like something that's going to like catch you off guard. It does exactly what it needs to do to build suspense, to build tension, and keep you involved and engaged in the story long enough to get you to through the entirety of the film. Oddity is shot really well and it's lit very well. And as I kind of said, the thing that I believe Oddity does the best is that it knows what it is. It's a lower budget horror film. It doesn't try to do any really super complex camera movements. There's not any really crazy shots or anything that's crazy over the top or that they spend a lot of time trying to nail. There's not very over the top lighting. It's very minimal. There's a scene early on where the sister in the beginning of the film is literally just in a tent, and it's a tent inside of a house because they're renovating the house and she's going to sleep there. There's a light inside the tent. There's moonlight coming in through the windows, and that's it. There's like maybe like, there's a light in the bathroom she turns on and off. And there's like a couple of little like, they use the camera flash, things here and there. But for the most part, it's very minimally lit with moonlight and that tent. And it's super simple. They're not trying to be over complex. And as I said, same thing with the editing, they're not trying to do anything crazy, but they do have a lot of coverage for each shot so that they can cut away and give you a lot of different perspectives of the scene, really show a lot of different angles and a lot of different coverage to really really amp up the tension. And they're cutting between a lot of different perspectives in the house and outside to make you kind of feel like there's shadows just everywhere and darkness everywhere. And you feel like something could be there, even though there's not really any reason there should be something there yet. The movie hasn't told you what's going on, but the use of music and sound design is just like amped up. And there's all these different perspectives where you can't see the darkness and you don't know what's there. Something could be there. And it's such an interesting way that they build tension. It works really well throughout the entire film, particularly a couple of sequences, one being the sequence towards the end and the very, very end when they're trying to build up this tense moment. And it's like such an interesting ending shot because like you've already kind of told us everything that we need to know about the story. And there's this predictable element, but the way that they have so much coverage and they're like cutting back and forth and showing you so many different like POV shots and perspective shots, and then kind of like cutting back to the character, and then they're looking behind them, And then now you're like worried about this angle and this shadow and this. There's so many different ways that they shoot and cut everything that just builds the tension, and it cuts and it cuts and it cuts and it cuts. But like in such a way that really works with the music, works with the sound design, and just like amps up the delivery to the point where you feel like things are going to explode, but then it doesn't. It just kind of holds it. And it does such a good job with that. Again, how things are shot, how things are lit, and the editing. Of course, while I've already mentioned it, let's talk about the music. Music is perfect for this film. Very intense in certain moments. Works perfectly with the sound design to really create this atmosphere and this tension. While I'm talking about sound design, there are elements of like a storm outside and like rain and thunder, which do sort of add to these elements also. But the sound design in the film for like the creaking of the floors and like the closing of the door and the way that things will be super loud and intense and then be silent are just like so perfectly executed with the cinematography and the way things are shot to build up tension throughout the entire film. There are a few jump scares in Oddity, but I believe that they are earned jump scares. There's no jump scares that are going to make you think, oh, no, that was a cat, or oh, that was just a friend, or oh, that was just some fake jump scare, and then release all the tension from the film. Every jump scare is very earned and expected. Again, it's built up to the point. It's not like they just drain all the music and then boo, something jumps in front of you. It's built. It is told. The film's telling you something is going to happen. And so then when a jump scare comes, it is earned and it delivers on what it promises you. So it doesn't take away any of the tension because the jump scare itself is also frightening. Adding to the tension of this film, of course, is this wooden mannequin that is just super creepy. The design of it is just absolutely phenomenal. It really stands out in this film. Of course, I think that's going to be the thing that people remember and take from Oddity. It is, in my opinion, designed well enough and creepily enough that it could be iconic in its own set. I'm not saying that this film is going to be like so iconic that people are going to like remember this thing forever, but I do feel like it in its design could become like a franchisable icon type thing. And I'm sure that if this makes enough money, they'll try to do that. The design of it just works super well. And as mentioned, the way that this film knows exactly what it wants to do makes perfect use of that because, I'm not trying to steal from another person's review, like Chris Duckman said, but that ticking like bomb underneath the table, that's exactly what this is. And it's just something that's super creepy. You don't know what it means. You don't know exactly what's going to happen, but it's like, it's there. The whole movie, it's just sitting there. And so throughout this, again, as I kind of mentioned, slowly paced film, it's just kind of always right there. It's not the focus necessarily. Sometimes it's the background. Sometimes it's on the side. Sometimes it's in a box, but the lid's open and you know it's there. You're just so very aware of where it is the entire time. And it's just doing nothing. And there's something so frightening about that. Now, as I said, that might not be scary to you. That might not be scary to a lot of people. To me, that is the perfect use of tension because it's never not on my mind. I never for 1 second forgot about it. Like I was thinking about it the entire film, and other stuff is happening that matters in the film, but you're always so aware of this giant thing that's just sitting there. That's so creepy. Let's talk about Carolyn Bracken real quick. And she plays both sisters in this film. And I think she does an excellent job. She does an excellent job specifically at being two different sisters. And one is very specific in her character set. And one is very odd and very different. And I think she plays them both very well. She's very important to the story, very important to the film, because you're supposed to really kind of side with her and then also see her as kind of a villain in parts. Again, I'm not trying to give too much away about the story, but she's supposed to kind of play both pieces, and I think she does it very well. And towards the end of the film, and again, you're supposed to really believe what she believes and what's going on. I think she sells it very well. I also do think the guy who plays the husband is great in his role. Another standout to me is Tadhg Murphy. I'm sure I butchered his name, but I really enjoyed him in this film. And he's not in it a ton, but I feel like he had a very important role, especially early on in the film, where there's a moment where you're not exactly sure if you're supposed to believe him or not. And I think he plays it so well. There's something very endearing and about his character and the way he plays it that made me really like want to connect with him. And I liked the way he played it so much. I wanted to see more of him. Honestly, the acting overall for the most part is pretty solid. Again, those are the standouts. There's not a whole huge list of characters in this film. So everyone pretty much is a standout, but specifically those two to me, I really connected with. And maybe that's intentional. It's just the way it's written, because those are two characters that you're supposed to kind of not necessarily know for sure if you're good or bad, or if you can trust them or not. And so I think that they both delivered very well what they were supposed to do. Before I get into my negatives, let's just talk about one last aspect that I really liked about the film, and that is the fact that it kind of created its own little world. And as I kind of mentioned, I could see that if this does really well, being like there's so many different ways this could franchise or spin off or do different movies. I don't think that they necessarily should do that. Not that I don't want to see more from this director or more from this world, but they did a good job creating sort of this little universe with this sister and her shop and these trinkets that she has and these things that she does with them. Again, not trying to give too much away about the story, and the wooden mannequin, the creature, it does feel very like Insidious and Conjuring world-esque. So I like that they put a lot of thought into the set design and the pieces and trinkets, and a lot into that world and that idea that sort of adds to this film. And while it isn't necessarily the central plot, does create a world where a lot of these creepy things can happen. So let's talk about some negatives of Oddity. And I'm not going to go into any spoilers, but unfortunately, even though I'm not going to go into any spoilers, part of the negatives about Oddity is it is a bit predictable. The story is not trying to and does not deliver some crazy twist at the end. It is a mystery. It is a little bit of like a mystery thriller that you're trying to figure out pieces very early on. It's very predictable, at least to a certain extent, what happened. I think you could pretty easily guess one of a couple things that happened in this film, and you'd be right. And unfortunately, I wish that it was a little less predictable. I do, but I don't necessarily think that is the core concept of this film. So it works still, but like I said, the story does go in elements that are in directions that are very predictable, and I wish would have been a little bit more unique. On that note, unfortunately, I do feel like the major negative for me personally is that there is this thing, as I mentioned, this wooden creature that's sitting there. It's on the poster. It's in the trailer. It's super creepy. There's a lot of care, a lot of effort and attention to detail clearly put into designing this. And then it kind of doesn't mean anything. And again, that's not to say it doesn't do something in the film or it doesn't serve a purpose in the film. It does serve a purpose. And it serves a very good purpose in being super creepy and creating tension. But when you get to the end of the film, it's kind of meaningless. It's kind of pointless. And it sucks because it's a very big part of this film. And I didn't like how the story wraps up in a way that feels like things didn't quite conclude. Like it's felt very like there's this plan, there's this motive, there's this mystery, and there's this plan that's set into action with the sister. And then it all just kind of boop, comes to an end, and then that doesn't really matter anymore. Now, something happens at the very end of the film to conclude something else in the film, conclude a different character's storyline, which is a nice little touch, but it felt a little bit to me like they kind of were lazy with the ending, writing, and they're like, okay, well, we need to do something else, so let's do this little thing that we set up in the beginning. And it doesn't really tie in to anything else. It feels very tacked on. It's supposed to be planned by the character, and it doesn't feel like it. It feels kind of like, well, hold on. There's a plan, but that plan didn't quite work out. But then there was this B plan, But the B plan only works if A plan didn't work. And so that kind of feels a little bit like, well, did your character just not have confidence in themselves? Or was this something you thought was kind of nifty and so you just wanted to tack on to the end of your film? Another negative is the pacing of this film is slow. Now, it's only a negative to me because I could see people being bored with it. And I was not bored, but I could see people being bored. Some people don't like slow burn movies, and especially slow burn movies that don't have a big bang at the end. And this is one of those movies. It's slow burn until it ends. And there's not any, like, there's definitely stuff that happens, but there's not any like crazy ending that's like, whoa, it's slow burn and then it explodes. It doesn't do that. It just creates tension throughout the film and kind of just stays that way. So again, there's not that there's not big moments in here, but I can see people saying, okay, it didn't deliver for me, or it kind of like teased me and then didn't have this final conclusion that I was expecting. And I do feel like that is a negative. It doesn't quite conclude the way that you think it would. It builds up so much and then you want this explosion and it doesn't quite do that. It's just more of like a pieces of little things that conclude together without this like big grand ending that it kind of feels like it should have. So all that being said, I do have some issues with Oddity. Yeah, there were some things when I left the theater, it left me wanting more. And that's a good thing though when you want more, but in a negative way, it definitely left like a few pieces I felt like weren't quite wrapped up. It didn't completely deliver, but you know, I got in my car and I checked my back seat, and I haven't done that in who knows how long. I felt uneasy driving home, and this movie has stuck with me. Not like in the sense of some of those movies where they like really weigh on you and you're thinking about it constantly, but the tone has definitely stuck with me. Oddity is creepy. I think it's scary. Again, that means so many different things to so many different people, but in my opinion, this is the scariest film I've seen in a while. Manage your expectations going in. This movie is not gonna like make you poop your pants. It's not gonna like blow your mind, but it is genuinely creepy. It is intense. It is unsettling, and it will be that for the entire 1 hour and 46 minutes or whatever the runtime of this film is. I highly recommend going to check out Oddity. I would highly suggest going to see it in theaters. If you don't see it in theaters and you're waiting for it to come to Shudder, please turn the lights out, sit alone, crank the AC, make it cold. Or, you know, if you don't sit alone, sit with people who are going to be quiet and respect this. Turn it up, good speakers, not on your TV speakers. Watch it on good speakers, the sound design and the music. Let the film do what it does best and just let it bring you into it. And I promise you, if you can manage your expectations and you can let the film do what it does, it will scare you, it will keep you on the edge of your seat, and it will give you a genuinely frightening and intense ride. Thanks for watching, everybody. I really appreciate it. I highly recommend you go check out Oddity. Go support it. Give it a watch in theaters if you can, and let me know what you thought about it below. If you've seen Oddity, let me know what you thought and where does it rank on the horror films this year, because we've got quite a few. As I told you, this immediately jumped up to my number 2. It's not even a competition for me. Like number 3 is pretty far down here in my opinion. It's like First Omen and Oddity. So let me know what you guys think and where this is on your list if you've seen it. And if not, go check it out, come back and let me know. Thanks everyone, take care. I don't wanna scared, I'm a big bad wolf. Oh, I never see the silver lining, only see the gold. I don't speak in caps, dog, everything bold. And I put that on myself cause it's a life that I done chose. I said come through, you can see me on the west side.